Okay, welcome to my live stream number 22. This is the live stream where I'm going to work on my graphic novel, Two Stories, Book 2. And right now I'm going to be working on rough thumbnails, like kind of a hybrid between rough pencils and thumbnails for page 95 of my second book. The first graphic novel is Two Stories. This is book one. You can get it on Amazon and at most bookstores online, and you can also request it from your local bookstore. It's a memoir, a graphic memoir that grapples with questions of faith, mental illness, depravity, and ultimately redemption in a fallen world. And it's hand lettered, hand inked, and 120-ish pages. And then the sequel should be about 125 or so, 124 or so pages. And I am working on comping that out. So I have my script all marked up. I already did a live stream a little bit earlier today, not really much earlier, like 10 minutes ago. I wrapped it up where I went through the thumbnails that you're seeing on the screen and basically talked a little bit about repetition and how that kind of creates humor because most of these panels are like these subtle, here I'll kind of zoom in, ended up using this panel with just subtle expression changes in order to kind of create a little bit of atmosphere and mood on the page. The other plus side was I'm a little behind on where I wanted to be on pages, and it just kind of worked out to where there were some kind of tricks of the trade that helped speed up the process for that page, and I think also helped the feeling and the vibe of the page. So now I'm going to be getting into thumbnailing the next page, and we'll see how this goes. But it is late. It's like Saturday. It's pretty much 12 midnight, and I'm going to try to knock these out. My hope is to kind of do this fairly quickly within an hour or so and talk a little bit about the process while I do it. So yeah, if you're tuning in, I hope you enjoy it. And like I said, I also I said in my last stream, it's like it's been a really weird, chaotic day. So I may not be like the most entertaining person today on the show, but I should also mention who I am. So I'm Joshua Kemble. I've been a freelance illustrator for a professional illustrator for, I don't know, like over 15 years now. I've been a professional art director for about 6. And let's see, I think that'll basically wrap it up. And then I also moonlight and do cartooning and comics on my off hours and make books like this. So that's what we're working on today. So I'm going to pull up the last, I always break the panels up. Anybody who's been watching my live streams is probably pretty familiar with that. I'll break the panels up from the last page to kind of stay sequentially on point. And then basically that's where I'm at. So I'm going to hop into the next part of the page, the next page. I also realized, like, at this point, it might be good to have a reminder. I'm not sure how long ago we entered this building. I think that was in page 90. Yeah, so we've been on this building like a couple pages ago, and I think it would be good to have another establishing shot just to kind of remind people of the location this takes place in. So what I'm going to do is kind of hunt through previous pages that I've done, and while I scroll through, you'll notice, like, I don't know what it is about OBS, but it'll kind of blink when doing that. Let's see here. If I can find a previous page, I know I have another establishing shot of that police building, and I want to kind of reframe it. So I think that actually wouldn't be a bad idea to kind of pull some of those old establishing shots into this new one. So I have a frame that I did do right here. This was for page 79. And I'd like to kind of pull it into here for just some help in kind of reestablishing where the location is. And now that I think about it, I think I'll have that establishing shot be the second panel, because I do want, or maybe it'll be the third, because there's going to be quite a lot of text coming from this cop. So it might be good to have okay. So I think I'm going to have basically this character. What we're going to do here is sort of zoom in a little bit to him. And I actually want it to be like he's going to be a little bit larger, but I want the expression to kind of match the previous page. What's happening is he's kind of explaining that it would be a good idea in the story. We've had this like harrowing experience with our neighbor. We've where the neighbor pretty much kidnapped me, and then basically I narrowly escaped, kind of ran to the apartment that we had that's across the way. We called the police. They didn't take us seriously. We then called the police detectives at the station, and then overnight, like they the next morning, they basically wanted to talk to us about this crazy neighbor. So the night that we had to stay at our apartment in order to wait for to then the next day go to the police station, we are meeting. We met with a friend, borrowed a gun on the advice of multiple people, and kind of stayed the night at our apartment, with a gun at the ready, just to make sure we're safe from the neighbor. And then in the morning, we go into the police station, and the police are basically telling us like it's a good idea to move at this point. So we filled out like a restraining order and all sorts of nonsense. And at this point, this is the detective, and that's where our panels left off. In the last one was him starting to get into some more detail about this. So here we go. Okay. So this is going to be a bit of text that kind of gets more into the detective kind of sharing his thoughts very candidly with us about what we should do in this situation. And that kind of catches you up to the story a little bit. If you want to kind of check out the story a little more for volume 2, you can actually read all of these thumbnails on Instagram at joshuakemble.com and follow the story along. So this is the creation of that. So right now I knew I needed a lot of text, and I knew I didn't really want him to change his expression from this like deadpan character. So we're going to just basically, since these are thumbnails, we're going to copy and paste a lot of the characters where we can. Okay, so here it's going to say, he's going to start explaining who this guy is, who the neighbor is. The other thing, the detective found out that the neighbor had a warrant for his arrest. So right here, he's going to get a little more into detail with it. And it's a pretty good night here. The weather's pretty good, and I think we're pretty set. Like it's definitely a weekend where part of why I was behind on stuff yesterday when I got done with the week. I was just so exhausted that I just crashed. And so that left me tonight having to kind of make up time, because this second book needs to get done at some point, and it's quite a lot of work, um, and quite a lot of pages to get through. And so I feel like any delays are going to just kind of push the completion of this by quite a lot. So I'm trying to stay on top of it, and if I miss a day, make up for the day. And that way I can make sure I'm making progress and staying on track with when I need to get this done by. So, okay, here we go. He's got a long record. And this is him explaining kind of this character. All right, Crimson Owl Comics joining. How's it going, man? How's your comic coming along? Ronnie is working on a really cool comic that he's talked about on previous streams, where it takes place in like 2 different time periods. And a couple streams ago, he shared like pretty cool like Victorian house that he's drawing for this thing, but it kind of alternates between 1880 and 1980. I'm curious, Ronnie, do you have like a pitch for it? Like a, I don't know, just like a rough, like, I don't know, pitch line for the plot? By the way, I don't want to put you on the spot either, because that, to me, pitch lines are like a huge struggle. Okay. So this is going to be the police officer kind of explaining some more about this character. I think that might be too harsh of a jump. And this is definitely a lot of dialogue. So I think I'm going to have one more step. So it's basically going to go from like from like a shot of him to, I'm going to open up my previous roughs to where it's going to be, I think I'm going to pull this shot. And this shot, just in case. But I think I'm going to probably use both of these previously drawn shots. Or, you know what? I don't think I need both. I think I need, well, you know what? It doesn't hurt to have both just in case. You know what? Actually, I'll do a one step instead of a 3-step away. I want to kind of have this shot, but like, so this is the detective's office that we're kind of sitting in. And so I don't think it would hurt to have that kind of worked into the scene. Let me double check to make sure that would fit with the office. I think that would. Okay, so that's going to be from the right. Got it. Okay, so I needed to see this, the way that I have the seating in this scene, but it's basically going to have, so the cop's going to be here. I'm kind of having that conversation. Okay. With his, kind of decided to have like a little shoulder strap, but basically the catch is like if you have a scene, at least this is just my thought on it, but it's like if you have a scene with a that takes place in a location for a long period of time, you kind of want to make sure you're keeping people kind of seated in that location, and so it doesn't hurt to occasionally reestablish. If you've gone like 3 or 4 pages where somebody might like kind of forget where they are, it doesn't hurt to have like pages that remind people of the location. So right now I'm kind of coming up with a reestablishing shot. So there's an establishing shot, but now I'm reestablishing it because I want to keep people grounded in the location, and also just avoid confusion. And weirdly enough, like I feel like half of making comics is an attempt to kind of like avoid confusion. I don't know if that makes sense, but it doesn't hurt to kind of have like the clearer you can be, the more concise you can be. I guess ambiguity is okay if that's your goal. Like maybe it's supposed to be confusing, and there's a couple sequences where maybe that is the goal. So I'll kind of play that up. But in the meantime, it doesn't hurt to kind of like, for me, I was realizing with the sequence, it's not going to be bad to have like a reestablishing shot. So Ronnie, do you have, wait, you're not heading to work. It's Sunday. Or are you? I don't know. If you work on Sundays, let me know. But Ronnie usually will stop by on his like before heading to work. But that'd be a bummer if they have you working on like Valentine's Day, man. But then again, I have work jobs that would do that. So who knows? Okay, so let's see here. So this is kind of like fairly like crazy details we're getting regarding our neighbor and his past from the detective. And so that's kind of what we're blocking out here. I'm going to work out the type just before I start doing all the shading and stuff in there. I want to work out the type just to kind of see if I'm going to need to shade more or delete more or whatever. So this is him continuing. And what's weird, even when I was writing this, I was really weighing whether to include this, but my goal with this story is to be as true to life as possible. And um, I came to the conclusion that it's more important to be accurate to like what actually was said. Um, but it is kind of a bummer because it's like I have no idea if what this detective was telling us was true, you know. I can definitely say the neighbor was a very frightening person. And you can kind of read through it and see. But I don't definitely don't endorse this police officer's viewpoint. You know. Actually, police detective. Okay. So there we go. Okay, so we're establishing the scene, the location, and then it's always weird, like kind of talking about comics on a formal level when they are autobio. Like it's because when I'm creating them, like there's this kind of weird distance that happens where even though I'm writing about true events, I mean, there was a sequence earlier where it gets into kind of being a victim of violent crime, and that part was like incredibly difficult to write and then to thumbnail and kind of work out and sort of walk through because some of it was like stuff I haven't thought about since, you know. But in the case of like the majority of the writing of this book, it's like it, I'm fairly distant from it, like, and so I'm kind of viewing these people as like characters, you know. Like when I'm writing the script, it's a little more um, self like requires a little more giving of myself. But when it comes to like like sequences like this, it's like it feels very separated. Ooh, cool. Okay, Ronnie gave me the thumbnails. Not the thumbnails. My brain is so like scattered from just thinking about art all day. Okay, so um, this is Ronnie's pitch where it says to kill his father, but in 1910 he would be betrayed by 6 of his comrades that would be possessed by other fallen angels that represent the 7 deadly sins which he would rise again to seek revenge on his friend and his father in the late 1980s when Halley's Comet would appear again. Dude, that sounds like a very cool plot. I'm kind of digging it. I also like the tying in of Halley's Comet. That sounds really fun. Ronnie also has a really good YouTube channel you guys should check out as well if you haven't yet. Okay, so let's see here. Here it's just him continuing this strange information that he's giving us about our neighbor and kind of how dangerous the guy is. So anyhow, I just find it interesting the kind of separation that happens when you write about your own life. Like it's at least for me, it's surprisingly not much different than writing, any story. Once you have kind of the plot and the plot points, other than like trying to be as true um, as true to the story as you can, and then edit it so that it's interesting and driving towards like whatever your story arc is trying to kind of convey, like the main story you're trying to tell. Other than that, it's like it just by the time I'm roughing it out, it feels very similar to like roughing out any story. um, Off Fridays and Saturdays. Oh, that's actually pretty cool. I like the idea of getting Fridays off. That actually sounds kind of rad. Well, thank you for stopping by before you have to head to work. Let's see. Probably saw you and wanted. Okay, so this is going to be kind of like the way to pull an establishing shot, because at this point you kind of know who's speaking, and you know he's in that window. And we pulled out just to kind of remind people of where the setting is, because I want to reestablish that so people don't feel like they're in this like floating world. It's also really important because you want to avoid kind of just doing floating head sequences. Okay, so here it's going to be cutting back to probably that frame before, so we'll see. Okay. Okay. I do want to go back to this shot of him. So the nice thing about like a scene like this though is I can get a lot of use out of stuff I've already drawn. So these thumbnails tend to, like in a sequence like this, you know, it both benefits the story to have a little bit of repetition, but it also saves me a little bit of work in the long run, which is kind of cool. So I'll enjoy it while it lasts because it'll probably shift very quickly. Okay, so here we go. And once again, if his expression is barely changed because of the content of what he's saying, it can add to a little bit of the surreal quality. And also just the candid nature, because you know, anytime I'm thumbnailing, I'm thinking about like the mood of the story at the time, and this is very much just like, here's a bunch of information you may not want to know. So I think like the deadpan delivery, it's also like strangely like, and you guys will notice this in two stories too. Like the first book, there is also a little bit of humor to like the darkness. So it's a very like heavy comic, but it also has like a little bit of a dark humor to it, and then sometimes just a very light humor, but it's sort of intentionally that way so things don't get too heavy. But we'll see how this goes. Thanks, Ronnie. Ronnie said it's looking like a cool layout. Yeah, I hope so, man. It's funny. I tend to like mapping these out, and I feel like sometimes it's kind of like trying to lay it out like. But there's a response. I'm not sure where I want to. There's an angle I've drawn, and I'll see. That'll work for that. Okay, merge down. So I do like it kind of pulling out from the sequence to reestablish. Haha. We've been invaded.
Hello.
Hey Corey, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm slamming through these. Like I got behind yesterday. And so I had to kind of make up for it. And maybe that's my own little psychological thing to do 2 streams, but I felt like I wrapped up this page. I'm going to break for like 10 or 15 minutes, so I might as well just do 2. So now I'm doing a second page, and I was talking about sort of like the strange thing about pages like this where a lot of the sequences are going to be repeating like panels, which is actually like really apropos. Here, let me I just realized like I'm totally off screen. Let me do my thin stack. How's that look?
There we go. You still have your giant lower. I'm going to start calling it a lower half instead of a lower third.
Hey, it works great when I'm solo streaming. Let's see here. Let me get rid of that branding though. Okay, so there we go. And then how do we just have like the bubbles with our names pop up?
Like this.
You magician, you. Okay.
And then I'll do you one better. And do that. There we go. It'll just scroll across the screen for you.
I like it. So I'll probably rock those businesses whenever I have like a guest, and then I'll pop them off when I'm soloing. Because different looks for different things. I'm going to also increase the size of this. Okay, cool. So anyhow, I was talking about one of the cool things and weird things about like thumbnailing and comping like a section like the one I'm working on now is like I'm doing a lot of cut and paste of stuff I've already drawn because I have sequences like let me see the sequence I just finished where it's like this exchange. Let me show you that because I think you'll get what I'm getting at. So it's like this exchange where it's like for the beat of the story, it just works to have like a little bit of like a deadpan delivery. Oh, whoa. Okay. Oh, I see you made it.
I just made it full screen so I could see what you're doing.
So it says I expected him to scold me or tell me I was insane. And then it's like possibly arrest me, right? It's the same shot, but just mild expression change. And then it goes to, it's a good idea. And then dead silence, right? So it's like for the beat of the story, that works perfectly. And there's a lot of that kind of deadpan delivery in the sequence I'm working on. So
yeah,
it's kind of interesting. But what's cool, and I don't know if this is just like Providence or whatever, but it totally ties into the Graham Annabelle stuff because he does a lot of that. And so I'm kind of excited. I'm excited about Monday because I'm like, it's like I just happen to be in a part of a story where I'm using a trick he uses all the time, and it's an animation thing, I think, but it's just like there's certain points in a story where, like, especially in a graphic novel where you have a ton of pages to work with, you can have these like beats. Because there's nothing that infuriates me more than reading a book where it feels rushed.
You have a type.
Yeah.
I was giving this a shot again.
Oh, nice.
And he does that as well.
Yeah. I mean, he does it more than I do for sure. but I like that there's like a pace to it, and I don't know, there's like a patience to it. But it can also be infuriating too. So I feel like my vibe's a little different than the full outwear. I don't know.
Yeah.
You're revisiting.
What's that?
You're revisiting Jimmy Corrigan though, huh?
Yeah, I figure you're gonna get to it at some point, and so I've gotta
Oh,
give it a decent shot rather than the first few pages and then bailing on it. So
I like it. I hope it doesn't feel like homework.
no, I wouldn't say homework. It's very disorienting.
Yeah, it really is.
So which isn't necessarily bad, but it's definitely a different type of storytelling than I'm used to.
Have you gotten to sequences where you have to actually flip the book?
Not yet, no.
Okay. There's just a few moments like I think that book was one of the first comics I read where I had it I turned it upside down without realizing it. And then
Yeah.
I was like, wait, how did he
I did that
like
with Capullo's Batman.
yeah, yeah.
And I was like, he gets drugged by the Court of Owls and he's wandering around in the catacombs of Gotham, getting further and further disoriented. And you start to tilt the book to see it, and then all of a sudden you're reading upside down and you're like, wait, do I turn to the right or to the left? And then you realize I am as disoriented as the character is. Yeah, it's a great. I can't imagine
Cool.
that works in very many stories, but it definitely works when it's used well.
Yeah, yeah. And what's weird is and this is something a lot of people don't know, but it's like the impact Ware had on the industry is pretty significant too. Because if you look at the year that Jimmy Corrigan, like the full collected came out, and you look at book covers before that and book covers after that in comics,
Yeah,
it's like night and day. It's nuts. That's when Fantagraphics was like, we're gonna do all hardcovers, and like it just, I think everybody was like flipping out over. Um, so I think a lot of like the mainstream guys too were really influenced by Ware. Just some of the stuff he was doing was like nobody was doing.
yeah.
But it also is, he's like my favorite cartoonist, so I'm a little biased for sure.
I'm really interested for that episode because he's not my favorite.
Mm.
So it'll be really interesting because I thoroughly enjoy most of your takes on things,
Yeah.
and so I'm interested to kind of like talk that one out.
Yeah, and I do think it might be a genre thing too, because it's like like I like Catcher in the Rye a lot, and I like
I
I
like
like
Catcher
a
in
lot
the
of
Rye.
that slice of life stuff.
Yeah, I enjoyed Catcher in the Rye. Hey, Ronnie.
All right,
Well,
Ronnie's hanging out. I guess he has to work on Sundays, which is a bummer, but he also gets Fridays off, which is awesome. So let me see.
Monday is a holiday, and
Hmm.
because it's the second holiday of the semester, they're moving all of the Monday classes to Tuesday, but I don't have any Monday classes. And so I don't have anything Monday or Tuesday now,
Wow.
except I don't have any classes except because I got sick this week. I am so far behind on grading that I'm probably going to take both Monday, which should have been a day off, and Tuesday just to catch up on grading.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Grading can be a beast, but
Yeah. And I'm reading Will Terry's What I Wish I Would Have Learned in Art School.
Oh, nice.
And I'm like, oh man, I got to do better as a teacher.
Oh, dude. See, so before I get to Where, because I'm going alphabetically, so that might be like a year. I'm gonna get to Klaus for sure, and it's like I can't wait to get into like 8 Ball and Art School Confidential, like the short. Like it's it's so good. It's
Yeah.
such a good trashing on Art School. It's actually pretty popular among a lot of college professors too. Anybody who's been in an art program, it's pretty.
Well, a lot of the things that people complain about in art school or just universities in general,
Mhm.
the professors would do it differently if they were allowed to.
Yeah. Well, that's why, like, oh man, see, if I ever do, like, if I get sick of doing comics for our reviews and decide to like switch to novels, which probably won't be for a while, But I definitely want to do Chip Kids, the Cheese Monkeys, because it's like such a good book, and mainly because of that. Like, it's just a biting critique of like the restraints put on art teachers.
Right.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting seeing. I work at a great school, and they really do care about the students. It's not. There are a lot of schools that are in it for the money, and they're kind of degree mills or whatever. But I mean, this is an institution that really is trying to do the best it can do.
Of course.
And it's interesting that even in that environment, there's still bureaucracy must be served. You still have to pay the piper, and like for accreditation, we're going through accreditation review again, which happens every couple of years. And for accreditation, they're like, we need you to do, I don't have to get into details, but we need you to do this stuff. And I'm like, that literally doesn't make sense in my class.
Yeah.
Like I have this one class that is intentionally not structured. Like, it's like, there's an assignment at the beginning, pitch me your project. There's an assignment at the end, turn in the project that you finished this semester. That's it. And they're like, here's this thing that we need you to do for accreditation. And I'm like, this doesn't fit into this course.
Yeah.
Yet, it's like trying to have custom education fit into a one size fits all thing. And they're just like, well, you've got to do it.
So I think like one of the issues is kind of like similar to friends of mine who teach high school, where, and not that it's the same, but there is a similar bureaucracy to it. That's like, so there's state testing, which they had to kind of do partially because, a lot of schools weren't kind of teaching like things they needed to be teaching.
Right.
And so they're like, okay, we'll make everybody take a test that shows that they're being taught the right things. Unfortunately, the byproduct of that is like good teachers who were teaching really good content suddenly have to spend like a huge chunk of their curriculum teaching to the test. And so like they're actually losing education time in like trying to get kids to do this rote learning so they do well in the test. And so like it's like beneficial for the crappy teachers because it forces them to actually teach something. But then for the teachers who are doing really well, it can kind of stifle them. And so it can be like kind of a similar thing to like, like really good kids in a class where you have to teach for everyone.
Yeah.
They can miss out a little bit because you're having to teach for the entire class. So it's like, and that's at the best schools, at the best institutions. And then there's also just like the weird conundrum of just like, that's just the nature of like, in a weird way, like any system, like which and systems are necessary for things to run, but unfortunately, like for things to run, you need systems. For systems to run, you need protocols. And the downside of protocols is things like what you're just describing, where it's like this, I get that it's a protocol, but this doesn't function for my class. And yet for efficiency's sake, they need to make sure everyone does it. And that's kind of one of the unfortunate things, I don't know.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like when you go to a hospital or whatever, and you're like, look, you can tell, like, let's pretend you went to the hospital with like a bullet wound and they're having you sign all this paperwork. And you're like, look, I have a bullet wound. So just like, can we sign this later and take care of the wound? But unfortunately, because of the way things are structured, like anywhere, like I think that's inevitable. And the downside is I don't know if there is a world where that kind of thing isn't like inevitable, like, I don't know. Maybe I'm rambling, but
I think there is.
I don't think that's a bad sign for a school. I think it's just kind of is the nature of school,
I think there is a world where where you avoid that, but it's not a world that includes everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
It's like that's almost an Ayn Randian situation where, if you get rid of bureaucracy, then most of society won't fit into that system. And those that like excel naturally will do excellent. Everybody else is going to die and starve to death in the middle of the desert.
Yeah, and see that, like, I don't know if that's that's the tough part, is like, I don't know if that's a solution I would be happy with. So it's like,
yeah, no, and obviously that's not great at all. Yeah.
But it is a bummer, dealing with those kind of systems, even though they're necessary,
Yeah.
I do think, oh, hang on a sec. Let me get this panel going real quick.
If the front tires of a vehicle are the ones that turn and you're in reverse, your pivot point would be near the rear axle, right?
You lost me at pivot point.
Let me hold on. I'm just trying to think this out. Let me share this. Share screen.
So
if this car
yeah,
this car is reversing, it's going to come around this way. And the front tires are the ones that turn. And in reverse, the origin of the pivot would be closer to the back.
Yeah, because it's almost like the push is coming from behind it. But yeah, the thing that's pushing isn't going to be causing the movement, right? It's going to have to push, and then the back tires will move. Yeah, I think you're right. I hope I'm not giving you false information there. I'm also a person who, like, I have trouble distinguishing between four-wheel drive and, like, I haven't lived in a state where I would need to know the difference. I know there's a difference between, like, front wheel and back wheel drive, I guess, some theoretically in my head, but I don't. It's like I know it, but I don't know it.
The difference is rear wheel drive in a car gets you stuck in the snow. That's the difference. Because front wheel drive, you have the weight of the engine sitting on top of the front wheels, so you have more grip because there's more mass up there.
Okay, that makes a little more sense. Aren't most, I don't know, like, what's a typical car? Just like a four-door sedan kind of thing. Those are usually front wheel, right?
I don't know. I think it's easier to build them rear wheel because the rear wheels are fixed. They don't turn. And so I think it's easier to add power to them, add drive to them. But I think it's a better, more stable situation to have it front wheel. So I think most newer cars are front wheel, but I don't know. I'm not a car guy.
Like, I think VWs were not front wheel. They had, like, the engine in the back, right? I don't know.
Well, front wheel drive and rear wheel drive is not the location of the engine.
Okay, see, that's good to know too. There's probably people who are, like, car guys who are seeing
They're
this
freaking out right now. Why are these guys so dumb?
Yeah, Ronnie's like, I'm out.
Yeah.
I have to get going.
I have to go to work 40 minutes early because this is insane.
Be safe, Ronnie. And by the way, your comic idea just sounds rad, like, very interesting. It's like a revenge story over like, decades. It's pretty cool sounding.
That's cool. Okay.
What are you working on now?
Finishing up what will probably become the final shots of Unchained Aggression. I thought I had a ways to go, and then I met with Jim tonight, and I was like, "Oh,
isn't that weird when you're further along than you suspect?"
Oh, that looks so strange. That needs to be.
So I need to. I love how these are going, though. This makes me feel like a superhero. because these always take a long time, and I have reusable assets, which will not feel like recycled, reusable assets when I get to the finish. But it is fun to have these little shortcuts. So that's another thing I love about Ware is the fact that he redraws everything when he doesn't need to. And you can only tell because it's like the tine split on his line. Even his line, like he could do that vector, but then there's that little tine split at the end, and you're like, oh, you're using a ruling pen. You lunatic.
Yeah, that is interesting. I've noticed that.
Yeah, there's definitely something I'm curious. So have you gotten to the sequence in the Chicago World Fair yet?
I don't think so.
Okay, you'll know.
Let me see. So I spent a very confusing evening and morning at his dad's place. Where like a significant portion of the stuff I'm like, I'm not sure if it's happening or if it's being imagined, and I think that's the point, is just to be kind of confusing. Because I didn't notice any particular visual indication of like a dream sequence or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I might have missed it, but let's see. So we go to he loses his tooth. I don't think I'm at the World's Fair yet.
Okay, yeah, you'll know.
Okay.
That's where it gets. I mean, it's pretty far in, but it's like I feel like that's the point where the story starts clicking, because it kind of becomes something more significant. But I'll be interested in hearing your thoughts. And then even those little sequences with him and his father become like really poignant. But
yeah,
later. It's a slow build kind of story.
Yeah.
I'm excited to reread. So I'm going to be doing my rereading of Further Grickle tonight, or not tonight, tomorrow, and I'm really excited about it because I'm going to be forced to take a break and read a comic.
Yeah.
I think could be dangerous because I might really have trouble stopping reading comics. It's so fun to read them.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome. Oh, that's interesting. I want that.
There's also like, if I should have probably told you, but there's a shorter Ware piece. Actually, it's weird. So he published these originally in this thing called the Acme Novelty Library. There was like these self-published volumes, and so he'll work on like that, and then this other story, Quimby the Mouse, and he'd like kind of alternate between the two. In this like in these short like self-published comics, and then eventually they were like made by Fantagraphics, but they were just called Acme Novelty Library, and then eventually they're all collected in Jimmy Corrigan. But by the time Jimmy Corrigan was out, he had already like started doing pages for other books too, like Rusty Brown and like all these other stories that he's working on. And one of the Acme novelties was just a story called Lint, which eventually became part of the graphic novel Rusty Brown. But originally it was just a short, like 100-page comic, which for Ware is very short. And it's literally every page is the day in a guy's life. It's really profound and kind of brilliant. And I don't know of anybody else who can kind of pull that off. I don't know. He kills me, that guy.
Yeah.
But thinking about it, there is like a vocabulary that takes a little bit of time to get used to, you know, because it's not like your typical comic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty well versed in comics, and he's thrown me a bit.
Yeah.
But also, I do think it is somewhat of a genre thing
Oh yeah, for sure.
because, I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest differences between you and I is I just don't really like slow moving stories.
Hmm?
Ironically, though, one of the ones I'm going to introduce is pretty slow,
I'm
but it's
excited.
also weird. Have you read I Kill Giants?
No?
Oh,
See, I think this show is going to be good because I think we're going to discover a bunch of cool work.
yeah, I agree. I think I Kill Giants is like if I were to do like an autobio, it would be like I Kill Giants. It's
Nice.
this kid who imagines these kaiju as her problems,
Oh, nice.
but she's experiencing real life, but then everybody thinks she's nuts because she's like setting up all these bridge to Terabithia situations, but she's like full on committing to it in school and with her friends. And anyway,
That sounds really cool.
yeah, it is. It is pretty cool, and they made a movie of it that I barely anybody has watched.
What was it called?
I Kill Giants.
Oh, the movie's called that too.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the movie tracks with the comic like really well, and
Yeah,
is very well done.
the great thing about indies is like I was thinking about man, I mean like one of the fun ones to because even like doing all ages books would be fun too because it's like there's a there's a I don't know if you've watched Hilda on Netflix at all, but it's like
I've seen a lot of the art for it, but I haven't watched it.
it's stunning. Like it's
Yeah,
really cool.
it looks great.
My son digs the hell out of it, but it's like one of those shows where I'm like, my son stops watching it, and I'm like, I get like 4 episodes ahead after he's asleep. And the graphic novels are brilliant too, but it's like almost like night and day, like almost well, not night and day. It's like day and day. Like the comics and the cartoon are so similar, like color palette, everything. And it's fun to see that. Although there's a part of me, like one of my favorite things about Where, and there's a couple cartoonists like that, is I cannot imagine it as a film. I feel like I do like comics that can only be comics. You know, there's one by Klaus that I can't wait to bring up too, called David Boring. And it's just like this surreal kind of like slice of life ish story, but it becomes this weird thing where it's like a guy walking in a dream through this absurdist scenario.
Yeah.
And all done in that weird Daniel Klaus way where like everybody looks like Steve Buscemi.
I would argue that you could do that in a film, but you would have to not do traditional film.
Yeah.
Like What Dreams May Come is kind of have you seen What Dreams May Come?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean that whole film takes place like inside of an oil painting,
Yeah.
which it's a metaphor for hell. And then what's the other one that? Oh, like Scott Pilgrim, I feel like was a decent adaptation. Like they had like a lot
I
of
like the movies more than the comics.
Yeah. Yeah, I was really excited to read the comics after seeing the movie, and I'm like, oh, and I haven't made it all the way through, but I was like, oh, this is a better movie and better video game than the book.
I feel like the book is very solid. It's just the ending. I think they did a better because he hadn't actually released the last volume before the film. So I feel like the film has a better resolution than the book. And that's a weird thing, but I also enjoy the film. Like just the direction and the way they cut it is just brilliant.
Yeah, that was good. And then I mean, I feel like Into the Spider-Verse was a good adaptation of kind of that genre bending
Well, I mean, that was just amazing. And I think when it's animation, but that was one of the best I've ever seen, like
Right.
for having the feel of a comic, but like it just, I just love that that film had its own voice, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, that movie was incredible. But I still think like, I like, I like the idea of comics that are best as comics.
Oh
And
yeah.
if you adapt them, it's not going to be as good. um, and I feel that way about Ware's stuff.
Yeah.
Although he did do some animations for This American Life back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty interesting.
That sounds interesting.
They're very like simplified versions. Like he has these cartoon characters that are like circles.
Uh-huh.
And it's like that. But they're definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
I do like so there's a couple other things I think regardless you'd probably appreciate in that. Like how do you like the beautiful muted flat colors in that book?
Yeah, coloring's great.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I like the coloring.
Okay, so let's see here.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out the timing of this.
Dude, there is no worries. I am getting close to this. He'll be. So you're almost done. That's amazing.
Well, I mean, that's what it feels like, but I still have like quite a few shots to do.
And then has Jim started editing, or he's editing the whole chunk?
Yeah, he's already started editing because we were sharing a drive, a Google Drive.
Oh, nice.
And so, yeah, he's already started. He's already started cutting everything together. So, there we go. Okay. So let's go from here to there.
Yep. Glad I did this. Okay. Move in that. So it's funny because I definitely don't think my work has the pacing or timing of Ware. You know, I think it's a little quicker. But it's like I definitely get a lot of ideas from his stuff. And he's one of the few cartoonists that I like read and just want to quit comics.
That's like one of the things I love about the Indie Review Show, though, is we're going to look at so many different things, and I don't think anybody is going to be like, oh, so you're a such and such clone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you can see, like, you know, like I'm nothing like Casper Wingard.
Yeah.
But there's definitely some major things that I have lifted from him, and yet still retain my own voice. Same thing with you and Ware. It's like, I really don't think your stories are anything like his.
Yeah.
But I can definitely see how there are things that he's done that have informed your work.
Yeah, for sure. And then his type, like anybody who doesn't like that typography is a lunatic. like I don't care what you think of his stories. It's like, and what's cool is he works a lot with Chip Kidd, but a lot like Chip Kidd, he's one of those artists who, like, once you see, like, you're gonna start seeing his stuff everywhere. So it's like, I remember after getting into Ware, I'd like walk to the bookstore or something, and I'd see like a novel cover where I'm like, the type looks like Chris Ware, and then it's like, oh, it doesn't look like Chris Ware. It is Chris Ware. Like, or Jessica Hish, right? Where it's like, I remember seeing her work everywhere without realizing it was her. So I'd be at like Target, and I'm like, what is it with that gift card? It's just gorgeous. Like, who did that? Because it just looks amazing. And then I'd be at like Barnes and Noble seeing like this classics thing, and I'm like, it's that same look. And it turns out it's not the same look. It's literally just the same designer. So anyhow, that's one thing I like about it. But yeah, I think there's a lot like that, where it's like, and I definitely think it's possible. There's so many good artists too. It's like, like Craig Thompson would be fun to go over. Alex Robinson's one of those guys I feel like everybody kind of forgot about. And like, he's so good, like Box Office Poison. Like there's just so many books and so little time. But what's funny is it literally is a fun show in the sense of part of why I'm doing the alphabetical thing is to force myself to reapproach books I forget about or books that I'm probably not going to pick, like if I go through and there's a book that I'm not like super into, I probably won't bring it up, but I think it's like a good practice to just go through like the good stuff that like sometimes I'll even lose track of,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Okay, that shot is done.
This is a lot of text. Okay. Okay, so we're at the hour mark. I'm going to take a 2-second break and get a refill of my delicious Magateers, which are extra delicious today. I kind of mentioned that at the top on my last stream, where it's like after I've been watching the entire proceedings, and I just felt like dead after the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's just not a... So
I mean, the interesting thing, I don't know. It's interesting because like it was a foregone conclusion that the truth wasn't the point of any of that. And so like being acquitted was kind of, we all knew that was going to happen. Still
yes.
disappointing. But he doesn't have congressional or constitutional protections for like breaking city ordinances or county ordinances or state laws.
Yeah.
Or federal law.
I've heard speculation, but the problem with a guy like him is, I mean, like he's been litigated for the entirety of his career, like pre-presidency, and it doesn't tend to stop him in any way. I don't know. It'll be fun to see if there's any sort of accountability, but I sincerely doubt it.
Well, I mean, DC is looking at whether or not they've got some cases for, some disturbing the peace and whatnot.
Yeah, there's Georgia too, which is going to try him for that phone call, which they did. It definitely should.
Right. And then, I mean, if you go back a year, look at who's the dude who did the report that everybody was sort of misunderstood.
Comey.
No, not Comey. He's the FBI guy.
Oh, okay.
The guy who actually put the report together, the investigator.
Which
the Trump equivalent of Kenneth Starr.
I was under the impression it was Comey.
No, Comey's the FBI director.
Yeah, I mean he. Okay, so. Wait a second. Okay, I did read the higher loyalty, but I get what you're saying now. Yeah, you're talking about the oh my gosh, I read the whole report.
Right. Mueller.
Yes, Robert Mueller. Thank you. I was getting that confused. Yeah, Mueller's report is insane too.
But if you look at the testimony that he gave after the fact to clarify what he meant, which was, if I found him not guilty, I would have said so, but I didn't say that.
Yeah.
And they're saying, so You're not prosecuting because you don't think you have the authority? Correct. Then somebody asked him, why did you do this? And he's like, I wanted to capture the evidence while it was fresh in everybody's mind, in case it was useful later. And then somebody said, so you do feel like it would be within the Constitution to be able to prosecute him on these charges after he leaves office? And he said, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I mean, like in theory, that all sounds great, but I don't know. I have to say, like, my faith in a lot of the system has fallen pretty low in the past 4 years.
Well, yeah, my faith in the system didn't start very high. But I will say this. I will say I don't think what all the newscasters are reporting is the reason why most of the GOP did what they did. Because they're all saying everybody's scared of losing the Trump base and blah, 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 blah. I don't think that's the case. You have a man who owns hundreds of high-end hotels all over the world.
Yeah.
That's got dirt on some nasty politicians.
Yeah, I could see that. But I would say, regardless, there's 43 of them that have no spine. And I'm like, to me, the part that bothers me is like, I can't imagine that it's not like that they don't know. Like, for instance, McConnell went on like I don't want to get like too heavy in it, but the point being, like, McConnell did go very publicly, like right after voting not guilty, and was like, yeah, he totally incited those people. And it's like, well, then what's your job then? As like, you literally abdicated your duty. And it's like, with the excuse of like, well, I mean, he's already out of office. But the catch is, he's only already out of office because McConnell refused to do the hearing while he was in office.
Yep.
And so it's like this, I don't know, it's just stuff like that makes, I'm frankly just, you're right, there might be dirt or something, but I also do think it also has to do with the base, because I do think it's a large base.
What do you think of the center-right party?
Is that a thing?
Oh, you haven't seen those reports? There was a large group of Republicans that met on some Zoom call a few days ago to discuss either starting a new party or starting a faction within the GOP that operates outside of the GOP.
I think that's great, as long as the people starting it aren't one of the 43 who were complicit with this nonsense.
Well, Romney,
if the 43 are in there, then it's just the same old crap with the same old corrupt people who have no moral caring at all.
Well, Romney was on the call.
That I would see it. Romney is probably the only, like, and I'm not I never have been like a giant Romney fan, but I have to say, like, he is one of the few out of the GOP that I think should be able to comfortably sleep.
Right.
You know.
Well, I mean, he's one of the few that, and there's a lot of people that are super pissed at him.
Yeah.
But he's just like, I hate party liners on both sides.
Yeah.
People that just line up. I hate them. I hate them all. I hate them all where they don't think, they don't stand out, they don't do anything for themselves.
Yeah.
He is definitely one that's like, you know what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Not because it's what everybody else is going to do, but because it's what he feels is the moral thing.
Well, and that's the thing, is like, I think he has some moral standing for sure. I think it's tough because I just don't think it can be equivalent. Like, to me, it's like I realized this the other day. So my mother-in-law doesn't feel comfortable walking in public in the last few days because of the uptick in violence against Asians.
Okay.
And that uptick is not disconnected from the political reality of what's been happening. Like, it's not. Right. It's because you've been branding a virus as China virus, and you've been like demonizing Asians for like 4 years, and your base loves it. And so that touches my life personally, and it's hard not to. For me, it's just really hard to kind of look at someone who would be supporting propagating that and being like, well, on the other side, like it's not a both side thing. Like there's one side that's been demonizing Asian people, and it's not the left.
Right.
And I get maybe there's issues like that where it is left, but it's like for me, there's a couple things that have dawned on me recently where I'm like I actually like the U.S. a lot. I really like our Constitution, and if somebody like literally was okay with an attempted coup of our government to stop a vote count, it's just hard to like. I don't know if I don't know how to have a dialogue with an American like that, because I'm like, that's not, you're abdicating the whole country at that point.
Right.
It's tough. It's just hard to know how to navigate with that, because I know people who are there. I actually have friends who leaned that way and were kind of dead silent during the whole impeachment thing. And the only thing they've spoken about is that actress who got let go of for like the Mandalorian. And I'm like, that's the one thing you're talking about right now. It's weird.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I guess I'm talking about it because it's like I'm still kind of trying to figure out how to navigate and be charitable and try to not be like too partisan. It's hard. Yeah. It's hard to figure out how to navigate, especially with 43 that just were like, yeah, because I think the problem is you lose all moral ground for arguments. It's like you don't mind violence against police. You can't claim that anymore. That party.
Yeah.
They can't claim, to be pro-life. There's a lot of claims that like morality claims that I think they've taken hits on, and it's kind of a shame. I miss, and I should say most of them. I'd say Romney could probably hold his head high,
Yep.
And then there were like 6 more, but I don't know. It's tough. It's tough to know how to navigate that, when it's fairly, like at this point, it feels fairly personal.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how do you skate, like, or keep from being too moved? Because I think you do get moved by stuff, but I think you have a better balance with that.
Oh, that's an interesting perception of me. I don't know. I make very politically motivated art. As much as I would like to be a more entertaining person in my work, I tend to lash out in animation and illustration.
Yeah, that makes sense. It definitely shows in the art for sure.
Like during the Black Lives Matter thing, like I felt so impotent and powerless, and not that I should feel better about things, because it's not like there isn't systemic racism anymore. There's still very, very huge problems. But I did find that after I spoke out and made something that I felt like, sorry, I got something in my throat. I felt more at peace once I did something that was within my power to do, like I donated, I researched organizations that I felt like aligned with what I'm okay with, and donated some money there. And then I also was able to make something that said something. And I really hate hypocrisy. And so I was able to speak out on the hypocrisy of the situation.
Yeah.
and I felt relieved after that. I felt like, okay, you know, there's a lot of things I can't do, but I did some things that I could do, and I will continue to do what I can do. And
Yeah, that's kind of as best as I can do. But I have, I think, gotten to a point with a few people I personally know where I'm cutting ties a little bit because I'm not with everyone, but it's like I said about like my concerns about my son and family. It's
yeah,
like when it comes to like I'm cool with being friends and splitting differences on philosophies and ideas, but if you literally want um like the country I like to become like a dictatorship or the people in my family to be like killed, like that's where I'm like it's hard for me to split hairs and be like, oh, okay, cool, we're bygones be bygones by both sides. I'm like, I don't
right.
it's starting to feel a little more personal than before. And it did when Portland was happening, because I knew some of the people who were getting beaten by federal cops sent into that area. And
Right.
so it's felt like a year where it definitely is like it's hard to I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just hard to kind of be.
Yeah, I mean, that's some of the privilege that I have that I recognize is
Yeah,
that I am not, I'm a straight white man in an area of straight white people. It's
yeah,
not, we've got a little bit of diversity, but not a lot.
yeah,
And the thing that I notice, I think this is something I try to empathize with, and also something that is concerning to me. Um, Generally, liberals lately tend to be much more fearful than I think is helpful. But
yeah,
at the same time, I don't want to be like, don't be scared. Like it's not my place to tell people how to feel about things.
yeah.
But
I
I
mean,
also, but I also look at it and I'm like, on a day-to-day basis, the president of the United States has very little to do with any of our day-to-day lives most of the time.
yeah,
There's some stuff, but I do see day-to-day fear, and I see that in the Republicans as well, and in the conservative side of things. When there's a liberal president, there's all this fear mongering, and everybody's running around like the world's going to end, and like it. I mean, I can't even. Well, I probably can because it's not that many, but it seems like every president we've had
mm-hmm.
has been. I've heard logical thinking people say, "Well, that's the end. This he's the Antichrist, or this is
Yeah,
he's the harbinger of whatever." And it's like most of the time, it either sucks a little bit or gets a little bit better, but it's not like
yeah.
there's
I
major swings. It has definitely been magnified in the last 4 years, more so than a lot of ways. But I wonder. I think some of that is Trump, but I also think some of that is like if the media, it's kind of like a bully that you don't react to. The bully goes and does other things.
mm-hmm.
And that's not always true. Obviously, like pacifism isn't 100% of the answer in a lot of situations, but
Yeah,
like if every time he does anything, and this is the same thing like that the conservatives did with Barack Obama. Barack
yeah,
Obama wears a tan suit at one point in time, and everybody loses their freaking mind,
yeah.
right? And it's hard when every reaction is dialed
Yeah,
up to 11.
the difference
Everything
that
Trump did was like the end of the
yeah.
world.
Yeah, the difference though, the tough part is, with Obama, like it was like 4 weeks of like his flag pin was being worn wrong. and how shocking that is. Or he shook hands kind of weird with this dictator. Does that mean he's a dictator? And with Trump, it was like Donald Trump fired a tweet that sounds like he wanted to assassinate a governor. And is that good? And Donald Trump led an insurrection, or tear gassed an entire audience in order to take a picture with a Bible. Like there's just a different
Oh no, and I'm not
that it's been brought to. But I agree, we shouldn't be afraid of that. What I'm more worried about is the 40. Like that's why today was hard for me, because it's not the president that's freaking me out. It's more like the 43 that were totally complicit with it,
right.
because that means an entire. I don't know. But I agree with you too. And at the end of the day, like how much that happens in Washington is like affecting us here. I guess it just got to me because it's like literally, one of my family members didn't want to walk out in public because we have a lot of Trump supporters in my area, and there's a massive uptick in violence against Asians by Trump supporters.
And that's where I think the main difference is. But I wonder how much of the liberals' reaction and the media's reaction to Trump has fueled that, because obviously, people who are violent in the streets are. A bully feels like such a watered down term for horrible, criminally insane person.
Yeah.
But it's that mentality of like, I'm getting a reaction.
Yeah, just
and that I'm allowed to do this,
I mean, in our city we have there've been a few rallies, and it's funny, I've talked about this with a lot of friends who don't live in an area like mine, who were kind of in denial about the idea that there's like a bunch of white supremacists who like Trump.
Right.
And it was like like I mean, like literally like a Trump rally down here, they boxed in someone's car and wouldn't let them leave the parking lot, and then were pushing, and it's a woman, and it was like about 10 guys just pushing this woman, and a couple of them had like Kevlar vests and were carrying guns. Right. And then a police officer came by not a police, I think a sheriff, who just sort of ignored the whole exchange.
Right.
And like that's kind of like what happens at Trump rallies here. And it's not unusual. And so it's like, that's not everybody here. It's not like there's a bunch of crazy people, but there's enough to where it's like this would be an area to like be a little concerned about. And it's kind of unfortunate. I agree, you shouldn't let fear live your life, guide your life, but it is kind of unfortunate. And to me, it's just the fact that that was expressed to me by my mother-in-law, that she didn't feel comfortable walking.
Yeah.
That just boiled my blood, because I'm like, what kind of world? Like that just shouldn't be our world. And like I said, I don't have that worry when I'm walking down the street. Like I don't have to worry about that. It's very annoying. But that's the part that's been on my mind, and I'm probably talking too much about it. I actually was trying to not.
Sorry.
No, it's not. You didn't lead me there. It's literally like a weight that's been pressing for the whole day. So it's been interesting.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I was hoping. I don't know. I was hoping for what I didn't think would happen. I mean,
yeah, me too.
What happened, but I mean, the fact of the matter is, our system is massively corrupt.
Yeah.
But the system is built to check against corruption. But the checks that it has against corruption are that it's really slow and inefficient. Like that, those are the main checks against corruption. Is it's hard to get stuff done because, like, they've built a system that is intentionally bogged down with bureaucracy and checks and balances, and it's like no one person can go out and just like do stuff. Like
They can't though? Because like that's the part that's baffling to me, because a lot of that semblance of checks and balances has broken down pretty severely this year.
No,
Where it's like
it's been the past 20 years that
Yeah.
there's been a major breakdown. I mean, Lincoln did it. You know, Lincoln had some massive overreach, and then really walked it back.
Mhm.
And then after that, there wasn't a ton of overreach. A little bit here or there, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, Coolidge, his goal as president was to be like, I'm going to do as little as possible and let the system run itself. And then other people came in and did some other. But I mean, for the most part, even
Yeah.
presidents that did a lot still kind of operated within the bounds of what the Constitution said. And then you had Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, that led up to this point where each one of them kind of like edged in a little bit more than they were allowed to do, and kind of expanded what the last guy gave them.
Yeah, with the executive power, it's definitely increased almost every presidency, but this is like, it's weird, but it's just a lot different.
Right. And I think
like close to, it's funny too, because well, it's not funny, but it's like they often will report things like this in Russia, where it's like, you know, the president, like not Russia, but like places. I mean, that's definitely a place where this is far past. They're a little past the coup.
Yeah.
But it's definitely like an unsettling thing in a democracy.
Oh yeah.
Like I don't think that's ever happened in our country. So that part's a little different, but yeah, it's weird, because to me, I was just kind of, it's weird. I always hope the best for people, and it's like I had a desire that there would be more than 7.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I kind of had a knowledge. I'm actually surprised it was 7, but it's just.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest, to me, this just feels like the natural result of what's been happening over the last several presidents. Because I mean, you had multiple presidents on both sides of the political aisle. Whenever they would get into trouble, would just start bombing things.
Yeah, that's true.
And I mean, that didn't happen on American soil to Americans, and so it doesn't hit Americans as hard. But that is just as disturbing. It's just not front of mind.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So, and I think that's, you know, that's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. But that's one of the things where it's like, oh man, I mean, that doesn't like stand out to me as whatever. But, you know, like somebody starts to dig up some real estate dealings, and then all of a sudden you bomb Libya, you know, or whatever. And it's like, well, that's not okay.
Yeah, no, it's not. And
I'm not doing that thing where I'm like deflecting and saying, you know, oh, but the emails. I'm just saying it does feel different because it's happened on American soil. But I think the level of inciting violence as a distraction or violence towards an end, this is a natural result of.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. To me, the big difference, and keep in mind, I'm very critical of like the war hawk stuff, and I think, unfortunately, I think Biden's probably going to continue a lot of that. But there is a slight difference, because it's like this one came about 30 seconds away from potentially destroying the democracy entirely.
Oh, sure.
And so that's, I mean, and it sounds like an over exaggeration, but it's like they were literally within like 30 seconds of getting, you know, congressional leaders like held hostage.
Right.
And what happens? Like, it's just a very bizarre it's a bizarre time, and it's like it's very strange that. I mean, I definitely feel like there's a lot of corruption, but I find it strange that, like, okay, in my district, right, there was this chick, Katie Hill, who was committed impropriety with a staffer.
Right.
She was a member of the House, and immediately was asked to resign by almost every member.
Yeah.
And there were consequences, very quick consequences. It's strange to me that, like, somebody could literally try to commit an insurrection and fail at it, but in broad daylight, on camera, and like anyone who's being honest knows it.
Yeah.
And just literally have no party accountability. I agree, though. There's a lot of problems with war hawks and with the bombing strategy. I mean, it's usually, I think pretty much every president has done that. So it is hard, but it is a tough thing, man.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the conservatives tend to get painted in that brush because they do it, but the liberals do it too. And it's just like that's why, for me, I feel like there's rarely a lot of difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. They usually have like a theatrical difference. There's like something like this where they all line up in their theater and play their roles that that they're going to play. But for the most part, they both act the same and do the same things, and it's like, and everybody wonders why we distrust politicians. It's because they don't, like, they don't end up doing things that we like. It's hard to be an honest person and stay in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, it's hard to be an honest person and stay in business. I mean, it's hard to be an honest person and have power. There's certain levels of income where I think it's hard for people to hold their integrity.
Yeah.
Because it's like at some point you have to be complicit in something, and that's crazy. It's sad that the system's like that, though.
Yeah.
But what I also find weird, because I agree with you on that, but I have to say I've had doubts about politicians and their truthfulness and stuff like that. But this is literally the first time where, like I wasn't a fan of George W., right? I mean, I don't know of a lot of people who were, but it's like when that was going on, I never had the idea that he literally had no intention for good.
Yeah.
Like and maybe it's just, maybe they're just better actors. I don't know. But I don't think I've ever had a president, even the ones I really disliked before, where I thought they like literally had no intention of good for the country. Even if I disagreed with them or what they were doing, or they were doing shady things, it always seemed like they had some kind of intention of good for the country.
Right.
Not that, but this is the first time I've seen someone where I don't think that's the intention. I think it's just literally narcissism and what's good for me, and that's it. And that's literally the first time I've been able to say that without any like, I might have suspected it, but I've never been able to be like, no, 100% this person does not,
Right.
This is one of the first times I've been able to say that about someone. It's fascinating. But you're right, it's not the problem isn't Trump.
Yeah, he's just taking advantage of the situation.
Yeah, and I mean, you wouldn't have a Trump without, like, once again, like 43 senators propping him up and a giant percentage of the population that found it like an appealing thing to vote for the guy. And ranked choice voting would be nice. It would solve a lot of this.
There's a huge majority that found it appealing to vote for the guy, because I know a lot of people that voted for him that hate him.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that they're voting against the other guy.
Yeah, with straight voting too, sometimes, where it's like, hey, like I know some people who wanted to own the libs, and that was like literally their purpose behind it. They just liked that he infuriated liberals.
Right.
I don't know. And then you're right, like sometimes it's a lesser of two evils thing.
Yeah. And I know people, I mean, I personally know people that are like, the only thing they care about is abortion. There's an issue where they're like, they feel very strongly about this one issue, and they're like, I'm just going to go with the candidate that is on my side of this particular issue.
Totally. I know people like that too. Although this is the strange part about the era we live in. And I don't know if this is cynical or not, but it's like I'm starting to doubt the supposed motivations, because I feel like most of what would motivate, like it's just there's so much that's been exposed where it's really hard to have any moral claim, I think.
Oh yeah.
So it's interesting. It's enlightening, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's something I'm trying to navigate, and I'm not I definitely want to be clear. I'm not trying to I'm literally not trying to like tar or paint anyone with a broad brush, which I'm sure it sounds like I might be doing, but it's like I just literally am like grappling with how to navigate friendships in that sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's hard because we know so much now about each other. I mean, all of this has always gone on, but like in the 50s, you didn't know, you didn't know that your neighbor was like a huge McCarthy fan, or like a secret communist, or, I mean, like, you didn't really know. You just, there was no indication. It was whatever they happened to say at a barbecue or at the water cooler, and that was 100% of your understanding of that person's opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And now
you liked a certain rock band, and then the next thing you know, they have you sent to like a panel where you're being interrogated. You're like, oh crap, I didn't know my neighbor was. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, it is hard to navigate.
Yeah, so I don't know. But yeah, it's hard, and I think this is naive, but I also think that this is the way I choose to live, because I don't want to choose the antithesis of this following statement. Just, I don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
But I choose to feel like most people have good intentions. I choose to feel like most people are trying to do what they think is right. And I know that's naive, and I don't actually believe that's the case, but I want to operate like I knew a guy.
I think that's the case. I do think that's the case. Go ahead.
Well, most people, yes, I'd say most people, but I knew a guy who got taken advantage of by a coworker multiple times because this person was a good guy. It was hard for him to believe that somebody would be so manipulative and Machiavellian as to just outright blatantly gaslight and lie to his face, because he was a good person that genuinely believed in the good of other people.
Yeah.
And I thought, he got taken advantage of multiple times to the detriment of a group of people, but at the same time, I thought, that's not a bad way to live, to honestly believe that people are good. I don't know. It's a challenge, because he's actually the same person that said, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not actually out to get you.
Yeah, of course.
That's good advice. I think by the end of his career, he kind of started to kind of see some nuance in some things and realize that he had been a little
Naive.
But at the same time, like, he was a very happy person,
Yeah.
very content person, and he wasn't like looking over his shoulder all the time.
Yeah, and I think that is a good way to live. I'm trying to navigate this new thing, because so this is going to sound over dramatic and crazy, but I'll couch it with, this is how I feel, because it's definitely not reality. And I'm almost done. I actually finished my page, so this will be our like ending thoughts, I guess. But it's like something that's been dawning on me, and I think this might be it'll probably sound like hyperbole, I think, especially to people who aren't like constantly paying attention to this stuff. But one thing I've gained, what I feel like a highlight into, is like some events in the past where people have been really complicit with some horrific things as a society. And those people could be your neighbors, and they could bake you cookies and be really nice people. So I'll just be flat out with it. I guess, like, I've been thinking about, like, if you lived in Germany at the time that the Nazi Party was rising, and how people navigated, like, you'd go to soccer practice or whatever it is, and the people who are supporting this rising regime are like, they bake cookies for your kids. Like, they're very friendly. They're very kind people. They care about people. They just also have bought into propaganda where they don't believe certain people are people.
Right.
And, but they think they're doing it for the good. And it's, I guess I'm just getting to a point where how long do you take the cookies and go like, yeah, we're, differences are differences. And at what point do you just kind of put your foot down and go like, I don't know if I can be cool with that. Like, I don't know if I can be okay with being complicit with certain things. And not that it's gotten to that level. I want to be really clear. It definitely hasn't. Right. There are like some little tick signs that I think are, especially for people who read history, there have been some unique things about this particular president that are not comparable to a lot of presidents prior, even including the war hawkishness and all the BS regular presidents go through.
Absolutely. So
it's interesting, because I'm like realizing, like, if I were in that time, like how long would I pal around with I don't know. It's been on my mind, and I have no idea how to navigate it. And I also don't want to overblow it or say I think we're there.
Right.
But I'm wondering when you decide like we're there, and I kind of can't.
Well, it's interesting because you read firsthand accounts of that shift away, towards a dictatorship. And it is a very subtle shift. It's not just like you wake up one day and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, you look at The Handmaid's Tale, and that makes it seem like, one day the American government was there, and the next day it's whatever. I can't remember what the name of the government is in that.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works.
No, totally not.
I mean,
like, Rise and Fall of the Third Reich was a book I read, like, luckily, I feel like I read this year. And, well, actually, the end of last year.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's really insidious and slow. It's not like everybody in Germany woke up one day and was like, "Oh my gosh, there are bad guys running society." Like it was a slow creeping.
Yeah. And I mean, even the British and American reactions to Germany, like, I mean, one of the reasons that Hitler was able to rise to power was because Chamberlain didn't believe
He trusted him.
he was as evil as everybody was telling him he was.
There are these quotes that don't age well where Chamberlain's like, "I met him and he looked me in the eye and we had an understanding, and he seems like a man who tells the truth.
Right.
He told me there would be peace after they take this country." And he literally had that happen like 4 times. Like he was just, but you're right. Yeah, it took a lot of people being complicit and sort of a little bit of bending. So
yeah, so it's an interesting question. I mean, because on the one hand, I don't think my neighbors and my friends, my family, my coworkers are evil people, right?
Yeah, no.
But I don't think any of us, myself included, are beyond being manipulated or coerced or hoodwinked or tricked into believing, kind of that slowly boiling frog situation. And so just cutting people off, it negates the opportunity to have that conversation of like, well, for example, somebody very close to me sent me something. This is about a month before the inauguration. Sent me something that was like a full-on QAnon conspiracy thing. And they said, "What do you think of this?" They had sent me a lot of crazy stuff leading up to that. And I thought to myself, am I going to just have to just start not communicating with this person? Because this is obviously false. It was like the storm thing where there was going to be this worldwide takeover, and Biden was going to be arrested at the inauguration, and like it was like the military, and it was some guy on the internet saying that some captain of the Air Force had told him something, that they were setting up all these satellites that were going to take over all of the TVs in the world and broadcast this message, and the message would start with these words and blah blah blah. It was all this like James Bond villain style stuff. And I, having gotten a number of messages from this person, I would typically just kind of just be like, I'm gonna ignore this one. But this time they asked me specifically, "What do you think of this?" Yeah. And so I watched it. I did some research to make sure that I understood what was going on with it.
Yeah.
And I just responded and I said, "This sounds a lot like the QAnon conspiracy, The Storm," which is, it doesn't hold a lot of water. And I didn't have to go into disproving it. And they responded and said, "Yeah, that's what I thought." And I thought to myself, my initial judgment of that situation was, they've been radicalized. They're like, they think that, that there's all these liberals in the basement of a pizza shop sacrificing babies to Satan and wearing their skin, or whatever. Like, but then but really it was just, they were just like, "What do you think of this? This seems weird. Is this weird?" And so my assumption of that situation was different than reality. The reality of the situation was, they honestly wanted to know what my opinion of it was, because it was intriguing, interesting, concerning, or whatever reaction they had to it. And so there is that balance of like, at some point in time, you've got to be like, and this is a different person, but what the statement I'm about to make is not related to the story I'm about to tell, but at some point in time, you have to say, "I'm not cool with casual racism. Like, stop saying that horrible thing around." or just stop saying it in general because it's not true. It's
Yeah.
awful, right? And you can't say that about someone's skin color and make a generalized statement about a trait,
Yeah.
trait or whatever. There's the difference between that and just saying, we disagree on politics, and there's a difference between that and just saying, like, I don't think that's right, and I've kind of read some stuff on it, and it doesn't seem right. And then you might be the one that brings somebody back from the brink, or somebody to you, because I remember I read something at 17 where I was like full on believing the U.S. government to end because of this conspiracy that was going to be brought to light and all this stuff. And I remember my dad's reaction to that was like, I was like, Dad, have you read this? And he read it, and then he goes, yeah, there's always stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, because to me it was like this, like I was Bernstein and I just scooped something or whatever.
Yeah, I think I had a similar moment as a very young, like, I wouldn't even call myself a man at that point. I was probably like a teenager, but it's like I did have like a few moments where it's like when you first hear a conspiracy and you're like, ooh, like, that's a good point. It's just, I guess it's tough because even with that, I've had that same conversation you described with people who fell into the Q thing.
Right.
And it started the same way you described, except it didn't end the same way.
Right.
Where they would ask, what do you think about this? And then I realized that's how they recruit. So they'd be like, well, what do you think about this? And put out the feelers and kind of wait. And keep in mind, I'm not saying that's how that was working with
sure.
your it sounds like that person actually wanted you to know. But what that ended up being was like almost like putting out feelers for somebody who may not actually be skeptical of it. Because I remember responding with like, here's like a million articles on, like I did a ton of research for these people to kind of find the flaws and like where the origins are and stuff. And they were just like, well, I don't believe that because that's fake news. And I'm like, okay, well, what about Reuters? Oh, Reuters is just left. I'm like, Reuters is okay. So what about, and like every single legitimate journalist I could find, and like nothing counted. So I finally remember just being like, okay, what source would you believe? And they were like, well, I mean, these are sources I believe, and it was random YouTube videos. And I'm like, I don't know how to combat that. So I once again, but to me, it's like, it's more of just like trying to measure for my own mental health how much I want to kind of parse words with philosophies that are dangerous.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's tough. And like I said, I'm not saying I have a solution because I don't. I like being a person who talks to people who have differing views. I like hearing what people say that aren't kind of towing a party line, because even if I disagree, I tend to learn something, and like that's good.
Yeah.
And I would hate like I don't want like a one party government. I think, frankly, I'd like it if we had more parties. Like I think like ranked choice voting
is a little concerning, but more than two would be great.
Yeah, agreed.
But I mean, that's how Hitler was able to come to power. Is I can't remember, there was like 14 of them.
Yeah.
So you don't need a vast majority of people to win. You just need a larger chunk of the 14.
Yeah. Although, that's another scenario too, where it's like when a party can have equal power to a majority party, but not have a majority of people. And I understand the necessity of that for range of thought and representation, but it also can lead to some dangerous things where a minority viewpoint can hold very powerful weight, and that can cause some problems when it comes to like populism.
Right.
So I don't know. Like, I guess my point is like, I just don't know. And I'm sure I'm being like slightly hyperbolic because of the whole thing that we just went through, but it's like,
A little bit, but I mean, how do you
feel to a point where I think there are certain conversations I'm going to be more open about, like where I don't want to parse words about, and then certain people who I might have to cut ties with, and not. I would never recommend with like family. Like if it's family, I'm just stuck with my crazy uncle or whatever, you know. But it's like if it's not family, I don't know. I don't know.
I got a lot of family. I'm okay with cutting ties with a few of them, but it's I mean, I generally, there was a guy I worked with, and I started to realize that he was very extreme to the point where I was a little concerned, and I don't get concerned often for my safety, but I was like, I'm not gonna. This is a weird thought to have with somebody, but I don't know if you've ever had this. Probably because you've lived in bigger cities, but you know that impression that you get, like when I'm in the same area as this person, he's always going to be in my sight line. No matter where I am in the room, he's never going to be behind me.
Oh, I know those folks. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is somebody that I worked with, and I was like, oh, that's
like one of those people where you're kind of like okay talking, but you're also kind of scanning the room like that's a heavy object if I needed to use that.
Like it's. I remember where
are the exits in this room?
I remember my high school biology teacher, high school chemistry teacher, was like a vet, and I noticed he was an awesome dude, but I noticed he never had his hands in his pockets. He would never allow anyone to stand behind him. And he would never position himself in the room where there was anyone in between him and the exit.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't obvious. It was probably because I was reading like a lot of like Robert Ludlum at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was really interesting, you know? And I was like, oh, interesting. And then, so I'm like talking to this guy, and he starts badgering me about like Second Amendment stuff and about, you know, stuff like that, and like gets very bullyish, you know, and like starts calling me names and things, and I'm not even like really engaging him in conversation. He was like just trying to get a rise out of me, like in between these meetings, and we're sitting there with like cheese and crackers and like a faculty luncheon, and I'm like, dude, I'm an adult, and you should be an adult. Like this isn't like I don't know what you're looking for in this situation, you know. So I would just, you know, I have a non-committal monosyllabic response to situations like that where I'm like, oh, like there's no way that you can take that as affirmative or denial. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then I just look for the earliest opportunity out. But like after that conversation, I started to realize that, you know, against you know, company policy and against like certain federal law, he was probably packing heat, you know, and some things like that. And I'm like, as somebody who had a conceal and carry permit for a while, that I let expire because I'm not interested in it anymore. Like I know the different types of holsters and where you can do things and whatever. And so after that, I was just like, he's never behind me, never in between me and the door. If he's in the room, I'm going to be cordial. I'm not going to go out of my way to do anything positive or negative for the guy or whatever. But I would not consider that I was like cutting myself off from him, because I know people that are like, if so and so's in the room, I'm not in that meeting, you know, or whatever.
No, you can't do that, especially as no.
Right.
Yeah.
But I know people like that, and you do too. Like we all know people that are like so extreme in the way that they cut people off. So for me, it was just like, I don't sit next to that guy. You know, I don't have lunch with him. I don't go out of my way. I go out of my way to try to not be on committees with him.
Yeah. I think that might be kind of more what I'm thinking, and I think what I realized is, what's lost with what's hard to have is like Corey, what you were describing about trusting somebody, like giving people the benefit of the doubt, assuming people want what's best for people. Like maybe they have a different take on it, but they're coming from a good place, like intention, and maybe that's not backed by action, but there is that common thread. But that common ground's all based on the idea of good faith, right? Where it's like you want to be able to engage with people in good faith exchanges, because if you lose that good faith, it's very difficult to like do transactions, to do business, to have friendships, that kind of thing.
Well, and it's
what I'm getting at is like I'm starting to lose good faith, or the belief that there's good faith of a certain political persuasion, just because of how far it's gone. And that's not all people in that persuasion, but quite a lot.
And I would agree with that at the top.
Yeah.
But I would agree with that at the top and scraping the bottom of the barrel. And I'll say that about both parties.
Yeah.
But I think the normal people that are Republicans and the normal people that are Democrats, I don't think they're Machiavellian. I don't think they're conniving. I don't think, I don't think most liberals are like, I want to lock up all the conservatives and take away their guns and do all this stuff and make it so they can't pray in school. And, and I don't think most Republicans are like, I want all the liberals in the concentration camps and, but I actually do think like the bottom of the barrel and the leadership of both of those parties are way more extreme than their followers are.
Yeah. I guess it's just tough when I live in an area that has a lot more of the kind of extreme at the bottom.
Oh yeah.
And so it's interesting. I'm just cautiously sort of approaching. I guess maybe the best route would be to just cautiously approach, but still keep good faith. But I also feel like when it comes to things like the livelihood of friends of mine or myself being in danger, it is hard to be cordial.
Yeah.
And I swear, if I hear somebody call coronavirus China virus in front of me, at least today, I will punch them in the face, because they're spreading something that has real bad consequences in the real world.
But honestly, though, you wouldn't punch them in the face.
I'd be tempted to. I'd probably ask them to leave my house, or ask them to, be quiet.
But let's say that they're doing that and they're not doing it maliciously, and it's an opportunity for you to say, actually that phrase is causing some huge problems, and you can explain it to them. And if they're a good faith actor, that's a difference than somebody who's like, I'm going to stir the pot, I'm going to cause some problems, I'm a jerk.
And like I said, I probably will have that conversation, but my trust in that being a good faith actor is depleted because of the multiple amounts of times of being explained to me that all lives matter.
Right.
And a willful choice to not try to kind of understand why that would be problematic.
Right.
And so it's just, I don't know, it's just a weird time. And I do hope it's like a political fog, but it's been interesting. And like I said, in that scenario I was talking about in another country where, years ago, where like you have the rise of like kind of a dictator or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
How long do you accept the cookies from your neighbor?
Yeah.
Like at what point do you kind of not? And it's an interesting question. I have no idea what the answer is. And I don't know if we're there, but it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of arguments. And I mean, we say history repeats itself, but it really doesn't.
Yeah.
There are themes that come back.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be the same. it's not going to be the same exact series of events. And so it's
Yeah.
hard to say, well, when this happens, you know, because I mean,
yeah. I don't want to polarize either, and that's and I know there's a temptation whenever there's conflict to create polarization, or when confronted with polarization to kind of respond with polarization. So that's why I'm like trying to be kind of honest in this, is like I really don't want to do the whole like, well, they hit me, so I'm going to hit them back kind of thing. That's not a very it's not a very Christ-like thing to do, you know.
Yeah.
So it's hard. I don't know, but it's an interesting thing that's been on my brain. And I finished my my page, and it is like 2 in the morning. I think 3 where you're at. So
it is 3 where I'm at.
How's your animation?
Good. Yeah, it's fine.
I'm
just
excited to see it, man. I think it's gonna be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be fun. And I'm excited. Jim and I talked at the end of our show today. I'm excited to get to. He's like the cool thing about this is neither of us needed the other person to do it. You know, it's not like either of us was like, hey, you know, could you, whatever. And we were like trying to strong arm each other into it or whatever. We both wanted to do it, and he said the other thing is, it's not like we have a lack of things that we want to do. We're both chomping at the bit to finish this so we can go do the other projects that we want to do.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's true. So I'm excited to get back to, From Hell's Heart and episode 2 of Endo Exo. And
I'm excited about Endo Exo, but I'm more excited about From Hell's Heart just because I'm a comic nerd. So I'm like, I want to see more comics. Although honestly, maybe I shouldn't be excited about comics. But I love them. I love them as a medium. It's just a hard medium. So
yeah,
I'm excited though. That's going to be great. All right. Well, let's call it, because it's in the wee hours of the morning. Thank you, Corey, for hanging out on the second half. Actually, most of this one. And if you guys were curious what Corey was up to earlier today, go to Corey Kerr's channel and check out Breaking the Chains with Jim Lujan. They're about to finish, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, we're almost done. I'm rendering final scenes as we speak, literally. So
that is so awesome.
Anyway,
so good. Okay, that's amazing. All right. Well, yeah, check out Corey's work at coreykerr.com. If you guys want, if you got this far, you're going to love the hell out of the IRS agency. And I'm not saying that facetiously. Like, it literally is our URL for the Indie Review Show, where later today, actually, well, not today, sorry, later tomorrow, we will be reviewing Graham Annabelle's Further Grickle. And it should be pretty fun. It's a good show. And actually, while you're at it, just go check it out. Check out the first review where Corey did a really great breakdown of the book Limbo. And it's excellent and worth checking out. And then other than that, if you haven't yet, I'm streaming while I'm working on volume 2 of 2 stories, but please go to Amazon.com and pick up volume 1, right? And then I believe that'll do it. Is there anything else I should mention before we cut out, Corey?
No, but if you go to irsagency.com at the bottom of the screen, Josh's episode, which is coming up, is already scheduled. And so you can go there and you can click on it and it'll say, this is happening in X number of hours. And then you can say, remind me, and YouTube will notify you on whatever notifications you have, whether that be email or the app on your phone or whatever. So go to irsagency.com and click on the little, like, tell me when this happens. And then you can be there live.
I love it. I'm excited. All right. Well, I will see you guys probably tomorrow, because I do these streams pretty much every night. And if not tomorrow, it probably means I just crashed because I'm exhausted. All right, guys. And actually, I am really curious too. If anybody like followed the political discussion and stuff, how do you guys navigate politics? How do you navigate talking to people that you very much have trouble agreeing with? It's a constant struggle for me, and I'm always kind of curious what people's methods are. All right. I will talk to you guys later, and we will see you I'll see you either tomorrow or whatever, but we'll definitely both be seeing you guys at the IRS show. So, irsagency.com.